Okay, we'll get ready to start then.
Okay.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق وقاتل لما سبق ناصر الحق بالحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله حق قدر القدر العظيم يا رب يصل أمري ولو أقتدي من يفقه قولي ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله ولي ولدين أما بعد يا ربي زدني علما Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, Alhamdulillah. We are back again with another Thoughtful Thursday, and we have an amazing guest today, Dr. Mona, who's a specialist in this area of narcissism, and also has a brilliant book, Muslim Narcissist. I actually have the book myself, and it's a great book. Actually, I'll put it up. I'll put the link up there where you can be able to go and get a copy for yourself. And so what we're going to do, we're going to ask Dr. Mona to actually to do her talk on narcissism. And then afterwards, we'll open the floor for questions. And if you have questions as it's going along, you can use the chat. You can put it all up in the chat. And then afterwards, we can pose the questions to Dr. Mona, and then she can be able to give feedback to all your questions, inshallah. And also, and while you're listening, you can ping any of your friends, whether who you know will benefit. So definitely they will be able to come and join in the conversation, inshallah. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Dr. Mona.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, everybody. I hope you're well, inshallah. So seeing as there's only 7 of us, or 7 or 9 of us in this room, I was thinking that if anyone actually has any burning questions, we can actually start the talk with those questions. Because I thought that if there was a larger audience, I could actually just do a seminar. But seeing as there are only a few people, if you actually have any questions, I can deal with them directly here, and it will benefit everybody. So we can jump into, specifics. If there aren't any questions, then I will start to I'll start speaking about the subject of Muslim narcissists. So does anyone have any questions?
Actually, Assalamu alaikum. I wouldn't mind asking a question, but like I said, you don't need to start with it. Perhaps you could draw it into your talk. But yeah, I was just wondering how, if we have people with these traits of a narcissist within our own immediate family, what's the best way to deal with that? But
right.
In your own time, perhaps you can deal with that.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so we'll address that. We'll address that after. Does anyone else have a question that we can start this talk with? Or shall I just go ahead? Right, I'll just go ahead then. So what I wanted to speak to you all about is the Islamic psychological perspective on narcissism. So as we all know, there's a lot of information out there from a non-Muslim and secular perspective on what narcissism is. So in Islam, the concept of, the disorder, NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, doesn't exist in Islam. Anything that pushes us away from the fitrah of, that purity, that wholenessness that we have when we're born as babies, that purity, that innocence, anything that pushes us away from that is considered to be a disorder. Any character flaws, anything problematic with your character, it doesn't necessarily have to be grouped into a disorder, as psychologists have done, but it's under the umbrella, all of it's under the umbrella of the disease of the heart in Islam. So the disease of the heart in Islam is essentially anybody who has major character flaws. Okay, so people who have serious character problems, problems with their morality, problems with their conduct with people, problems in giving people their rights and taking the rights that they're not entitled to, and so on. So all of this comes under the disease of the heart. Now, how do we know that narcissism, codependency, and other disorders that a lot of psychologists speak about fall under the disease of the heart? So we know this because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the story of the shaitan in Islam. So we know from the story of the shaitan, this is all in my book, by the way, in complete detail. We know from the story of the shaitan that anyone has the ability to deviate. Everyone has the ability to deviate from the good fitrah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us with, because all of our souls are connected to Allah and we have Allah's best attributes. When He breathed into the soul of Adam alayhi salam, we took a portion of that too. So all the great attributes and traits that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has, He gives us a portion of it. And that's why when you look at the Asma Allah al-Husna, the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's the most great, the most merciful, the most forgiving, the most patient, the most loving, the most caring. All of these attributes are found in humans as well, because Allah breathed from His soul into Adam. So when we look at the story of the shaitan, we know already that the shaitan was actually, he had a very high position with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before, he deviated, before Adam alayhi salam was created. He was the gatekeeper of paradise. He was Allah's favorite. Like, can you imagine that the shaitan was Allah's favorite? Like, in the sense that he was, he was so obedient, so loyal to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he was from the jinn, which means that he has that free will, free choice, like we have as humans. So it was only until Adam alayhi salam was created did the shaitan choose to rebel, choose to be rude, choose to be deceptive, and all of these things, and choose to challenge Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because of his jealousy and his envy towards, this new creation that had a higher intellect. This amazing creation of the human being that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to create to be more superior than the jinn by giving the human race the ability to be more intellectual and to be more efficient in communication and in the things that they do. And that's why, when the angels asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, why would you create another species of creation that has free will? Because a lot of people don't know this, but before humans came into existence, the jinn ruled the earth. All the jinn ruled the earth. And they created so much corruption within it. So much corruption happened within it, bloodshed, everything, wars. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created Adam alayhi salam so that we would take care of the earth in a better way. We would be better ambassadors. And that's why the angels, they said to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, why would you create another species of people who have free will only to cause corruption again? So Allah said to them, I know that which you don't know. So this is the beginning of the whole Islamic psychological perspective on narcissism, because this is the point at which, the shaitan deviated and rebelled against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he turned from being Allah's favorite to the worst creation on earth because of the narcissistic traits. Now, the narcissistic traits that are found within him are found in the story of him and Adam alayhi salam, the way he deceived Adam alayhi salam, the way he pretended to be his friend, the way he manipulated him, the way he lied to him, the way he gaslit him, the way he envied him and was jealous of him, the way he was so adamant on taking everything good from Adam alayhi salam. Even if he couldn't have it himself, he just wanted to take it from Adam. He wanted Adam alayhi salam to hit rock bottom, to disobey Allah. All of this to prove to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that his creation is faulty. That even this human being that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created to be more superior than the jinn is actually going to be more faulty than them, because it'll be easy to manipulate and deceive the human being with the satanic whispers. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he told Adam alayhi salam to not go near the tree, to not eat from the tree, it wasn't because there was anything special about that tree, as is in the Bible. It's just that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to teach Adam alayhi salam a lesson about the manipulations of the shaitan. So when he told Adam alayhi salam to not go near this tree, it's human, we've got human tendencies to always, we've got the curiosity. When someone tells us not to do something, we want to find out why. We kind of become so occupied with that which is forbidden. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that. He's created the human being to be like that. So he gave Adam alayhi salam a test. He tested him. He tested this, curiosity in him. And he said he was going to give him some training about how the shaitan works. So he said, don't go near that tree. So the shaitan comes and he starts to manipulate Adam alayhi salam, until he manages to get Adam alayhi salam to eat from the tree. And then, he was asked to leave paradise with the shaitan. So a lot of people say, Allah could have protected Adam alayhi salam and Hawa from eating from that tree. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed him to do that. He allowed Hawa to do that too, so that they could learn about the tricks of the shaitan. Now, modern day psychologists, and even going back to Freud, he wrote the first book on narcissism back in 1914. He started to realize that there were patterns between people, and they grouped it under the name of narcissism. So we managed to link the traits of narcissism to the story of the shaitan because of the manipulation. It's the same exact manipulations that happen in human beings today. And that's why we know Islamically that it's satanic energy. Because the father of narcissism is the shaitan. And it's the satanic whispers that people get that teach people how to be narcissistic. And that's why you find that they're all the same. They're all the same in their manipulation. They're all the same in how they deal with things and how they abuse people. Okay, there are some, they use different tactics and different strategies here and there. But for the most part, if you listen to couples who are going through, like a toxic marriage, or women who are complaining of a narcissistic Muslim husband, you will find that they're all the same. It's like they are reading the same textbook and they are applying the same strategies in that textbook. It's because this is satanic energy. It's the satanic energy that's come to them from the shaitan. So when Adam alayhi salam came to the earth with Hawa, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that, your enemy is going to be the shaitan. You guys are enemies to each other now. So you have to remain steadfast and you have to teach people the tricks of the shaitan. Teach people how to avoid the deceptions of the shaitan, because he will use all of them. And Allah warned us in the Quran. He said there will be shayateen al-ins and shayateen al-jinn. So we've got the evil jinn that we can't see, who mess with our mental health. All those suicidal thoughts people get, the depressive thoughts people get, the negative thoughts that people get, all of that comes from the evil jinn and our qareen that follows us everywhere. And then you've got shayateen al-ins. Shayateen al-ins are the evil humans that, again, they are the ones who don't want the good for us. They push us into sins. They're the bad friends, bad family members, toxic people that we're married to. All of these people are classed under the umbrella of shayateen al-ins. So you will find that shayateen al-ins and shayateen al-jinn, because they have satanic energy, they operate in the same way. So psychologists have grouped it under the traits of narcissism. Anyone who has, narcissistic traits or a high amount of narcissistic traits are considered to be narcissists. So in Islam, the way we know if someone is narcissistic is by consistency. And this is what the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said to us. He said, if you want to know somebody's true character, watch how they are every day. So if someone is empathic, he'll be empathic every day. If someone is a narcissist, they'll be narcissistic every day. You don't actually need to go and have a diagnosis for it. You don't need a clinical diagnosis. Just look at the people around you and look at yourself. Are you narcissistic every day? Are you abusive every day? Do you take advantage of people every day? Do you lie every day? Do you find it easy to get away with, sins that you commit against people every day? If you do, then you're narcissistic. And we all have narcissistic traits. Every single one of us has it, because we have a qareen. The qareen, the jinn, devil that follows us around everywhere, ensures that we have a portion of narcissistic traits. So, for example, we all have the ability to lie, the ability to steal, the ability to manipulate, the ability to do awful things in this world. But the difference between a narcissist and someone who isn't is that someone with empathy will think twice about doing that. They'll think twice before lying, because They're going to think of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're going to think of the Day of Judgment. They're going to put themselves in that person's shoes and ask themselves, you know, would I like someone doing that to me? That's the empath. An empath is somebody who considers other people's feelings, and they consider Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the bigger picture of things. So they have more of, they've got more of the strength to restrain themselves from committing, you know, major sins and oppressing people. That's what makes the empath powerful. They have that self-discipline. Now, the narcissist, on the other hand, doesn't. The narcissistic person, his ego or her ego runs away with them. So they are constantly not in control of who they are. So when the opportunity is presented to them to lie to have more money, or to deceive this person so that they can marry them, or to, you know, manipulate this person into believing that they're a good person when they're not, they will take it. They will take it because they are not in control of their egos. They're not in control of their nafs. So they will run after it. And that's why the narcissists always chase the dunya. The more empathic you are, the less attached you are to this dunya. And the more narcissistic you are, the more attached you are to this dunya. That's why you find a lot of narcissists, they care about properties and money and cars and designer things and looks and beauty and plastic surgeries, and because they are so attached to this dunya, because the kingdom of the shaitan is in this dunya. And the kingdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, we know it's in paradise. It's in the spiritual realm. So what makes people narcissistic is the lack of empathy. Now, a lot of psychologists say that narcissists have no empathy at all, which is not true. Everyone, out of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has a portion of empathy. The only issue with narcissists is that the more narcissistic they get, the less the empathy they have. And the more empathic you are, the less narcissistic traits you have. So it's an opposite. It's on an opposite scale. Now, the less empathy you have, the harder it is for you to turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and repent. Because you need a decent amount of empathy to know that you can hold yourself accountable for the wrong that you do. So the more narcissistic you become, and they get worse with age, narcissists always get worse with age, because they come across a lot of enablers in their life. A lot of their victims tolerate abuse. They don't find people who stop them abusing. So there's a hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you know, when the Sahabi asked him, what can we do, you know, to help the oppressed? And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, you have to stop the oppressor. And, you know, this is a form of love and brotherhood towards the oppressor as well. Because if you allow an oppressor to get away with the sins and the major, you know, the major abuse that they inflict on other people, then you're not helping that abuser either. At the end of the day, that's also your brother in Islam. I'm talking about Muslims here. That's your brother in Islam, and you need to help him to stop abusing people. You need to stop him from doing it. But when you enable, when people turn a blind eye because they don't want to get involved in people's marriage, or they don't want to get involved in, you know, the domestic violence that's happening in the same building that you can hear, when you don't get involved and no one puts a stop to it, especially when the person who is being abused is vulnerable, then it enables the narcissist to actually evolve into a psychopath. So narcissists always start as low-level narcissists who, you know, they'll try their luck, they'll get away with things here and there, but then it escalates. You think people turn to psychopaths overnight? They start as narcissists. The worst psychopaths, the worst tyrannical leaders, all started as, you know, as narcissistic teenagers because of their troubled childhoods. So I'm taking this back again to Islamic psychology. So when the shaitan, he challenged Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he said, you know, only your best believers, only the true believers are going to follow you. The rest of them won't, because the shaitan's mission is to entice everybody with sins and temptations of this dunya. So like I said, you know, if you want to be as far away from narcissism as possible, you need to establish that spiritual connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You've got to really enjoy that connection, because that is what will build up your levels of empathy and deplete your narcissistic traits. Now, narcissistic traits, and we know this again from Islamic psychology and from the ahadith and from the stories of the Sahaba, that people who have a high amount of narcissistic traits and they want to change, it's possible for every narcissist to change, by the way. I've seen narcissists change. I've got clients who are narcissists, and mashallah, they've made transformations. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala leaves a portion, again, He leaves a portion of empathy in everybody. Like if you look at the story of Fir'aun, until the last moment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him the chance to repent and to do right by his people so that he doesn't die a disbeliever, he doesn't die a tyrannical leader. But because of his arrogance, which is the worst trait a human being can have, to the point where the Prophet Muhammad said, if you have a mustard seed size of arrogance in your heart, you will not enter Jannah until you're purified of that. And that could be purification of, karma in this world. It could be punishment in the grave. It could be punishment on the Day of Judgment. It could be witnessing the Day of Judgment. Like, wherever it is that you need to cleanse your heart from the arrogance, that will happen by the mercy of Allah before you enter the hellfire. So the core of narcissism, the root cause of it, is arrogance. Arrogance that just keeps growing. And we know that it's arrogance because of the story of Fir'aun. Allah allowed his body to be preserved as a reminder for everyone out there that this is what happens when you do not restrain your arrogance. Because the arrogance is what will cause your ultimate destruction. So when you see people be arrogant, you know that their satanic energy has overtaken them. And in Islamic psychology, we learn that, for example, people like Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu and Khalid bin Walid, radiallahu anhu, both of them, before they embraced Islam, were very harsh. They were extremely narcissistic. Pagan Arabia was full of narcissistic men. And that is why the Prophet Muhammad was sent as a messenger, he was sent as a prophet to refine them, to get rid of the arrogance, to knock it out of them, to refine them, to civilize them into being people who are loved by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because it was their arrogance that made them treat women so badly, that made them treat slaves so badly, that made them treat children and the enemies and their wives and their mothers so badly. It was their arrogance. So the patriarchal societies that were prevalent in pre-Islamic Arabia were the exact, cause of the Prophet Muhammad being sent to them to eradicate the narcissism. So when you find people who have, again, the longer you are narcissistic, the more it's difficult for you to get rid of those narcissistic traits because you become used to it. It's who you are now. It's become a part of your identity, or it is your identity. A lot of people struggled to embrace Islam back in the time of the Prophet Muhammad, like Khalid bin Walid and like Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhum, because they were so harsh, they were so tough. And, as you know, Islam requires somebody to have a soft heart. Allah loves nothing more than a soft heart, than a clean heart. A clean heart that is free from arrogance. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that on the Day of Judgment, the one who will have Allah's mercy is the one who comes to him with a clean heart. The clean heart that is free from that narcissism. So what did Umar ibn Khattab do with the narcissism that he found very difficult to get rid of? He turned his narc traits into something good. And that's why he became the best leader. He became such a supernova empath. Like if you look at if you read about the life of Umar ibn Khattab, you will be amazed at how he managed to turn his narcissistic traits into a powerful way, into a powerful strategy to actually look after the oppressed. And so he used his harshness to scare people into not committing crimes. He manipulated people in war so that the Muslims would win the battle. His jealousy and his overprotectiveness that he had for his wives and for women, he protected women's rights with it. Like any woman who went to complain about any man to Umar ibn Khattab, he had their back. and men were terrified of him. During Umar's reign, nobody dared commit a crime, to the point where the Prophet Muhammad, he said to Umar al-Khattab, he said, by the one who created me, he swore by Allah, he said that Satan does not see you, Ya Umar, except that he crosses the road. That is the supernova empath. The supernova empath is not just someone who can restrain their narcissistic traits, but it's the person who can also use them for the greater good. That's the supernova empath, and all the prophets were supernova empaths. But Umar al-Khattab was very special to the Prophet ﷺ because of how he transformed his character for the greater good of the Muslims, to protect the Muslims, to protect the oppressed, and to scare the oppressors into fearing Allah. And the same was with Khalid bin Walid. He was very tough, and people feared him, and people did right by people because, they had someone to, even if they didn't fear Allah because of their narcissism, they feared Khalid bin Walid. They took Khalid bin Walid into account, and then their fear of Khalid bin Walid, it made them better Muslims later. It made them embrace Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a higher authority when they fully did accept Islam, not when they were hypocrites. So that's the supernova empath. The supernova empath is like the best human possible. He or she is the person that the shaitan himself doesn't go near, because it's too much of a challenge. It's just too hard. Those are the believers that the shaitan, he tells Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day when he was expelled from Jannah, that those are the people who are going to be your best soldiers. Your best soldiers. So, if we look at, this is a big subject. I'm just picking a little bits here and there just to create a picture for you so that you can understand how Islamic psychology does explain all of this. It explains all of these personality disorders under the category of the disease of the heart, because we're meant to get rid of our arrogance and get rid of our pride and get rid of, all of the things that make us depressed and have anxiety and make us weak and make us, fall into sins all the time. The more sins we fall into, the more barakah is taken from our lives. A lot of us think that when we commit sins in private without anyone knowing, that we're not going to get punished for that because it's between us and Allah. No. Like, even the sins that we commit in private take away from the barakah of things to come in our future. So it's that taqwa that you need to have, that piety. Who is the pious? The pious person is the one who fears Allah in public and in private. You cannot attain a level of complete piety and reach that level of supernova empath until, and no one's perfect. I'm not saying that anyone is perfect and that no one should be committing sins at all. No, the human being has been created to, fall into temptations, fall into sins. But the best of us are those who are able to control the narcissism, the narcissistic traits, because we all have them, and we all have a qareen that whispers to us every single day. All those temptations we get is from our jinn devil that follows us everywhere. And just like on a final note before I take questions, just again, to just kind of pull everything together, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he tells us in the Quran that there are 3 types of nafs. 3 types of nafs. So essentially, human beings actually fall into 3 categories. 3 categories, which is the nafs al-ammara bis-su', the nafs that is inclined to evil. And nafs al-lawama. And nafs al-lawama is the nafs that is, it sins and it comes back, it sins and it comes back. And nafs al-ammara bis-su' is the nafs that sins and sins and sins and sins, but they don't come back. They don't feel, if they're too arrogant to repent, they feel like they can get away with it. But the nafs al-lawama is the continuous sinner who comes back to repent every now and again. And then you've got a nafs al-mutma'inna. And nafs al-mutma'inna is Allah's favorite. And nafs al-mutma'inna are the people who, when they sin by accident. They don't do it deliberately and then repent later. There are people who fall into sin, not walk into it. They fall into it. They find themselves falling into situations, and they feel really guilty about it. They repent. So based on what I've taught you today, just earlier about the empath, the level of empathy in people, the people who have a nafs al-mutma'inna have a very high level of empathy because they find repentance easy. The people who fall into the category of a nafs al-lawama, these are people who will sin deliberately because they cannot restrain their desires. Like they might fall into like haram relationships or zina or drinking or, hurting other people, manipulating, deceiving, lying, earning haram money. And then they say, in Ramadan, I'll repent. But the repentance is still there. So that's al-nafs al-lawama. These are the codependents. The codependent people who will sacrifice their values, principles, beliefs, deen to get what they want from this dunya. They are also very much attached to this dunya as our narcissists. Narcissists and codependents, they are usually those who form relationships together because of the codependent's need for approval of the narcissist and the narcissist's need for the codependent's tolerance of abuse because they have the empathy that they don't have. Now, the empath out of choice, they will never marry a narcissist. They will never choose to live with a narcissist because their level of empathy, they're just so different from each other. But the codependent and the narcissist, they're both toxic. And then you've got the nafs al-amara bis-su', they are all the narcissists and psychopaths. They all fall into that category because their arrogance does not allow them to make themselves accountable for their own sins. So that's how we know that, even in Islamic psychology, people do fall into three categories, and you can actually place the psychological disorders that psychologists have come up with in those three categories in order to come up with, in order to know where people lie on the scale of a nafs. So I have a chart that I present in my seminars. So you've got a nafs al-amara bis-su' at the bottom, and then you've got upper level, the codependent, and then upper level, the empath, and then you've got the supernova empath right at the top. So you get some codependents who lean more towards narcissism, and so some codependents who lean more towards empathy, and so on. So you will know where you can place yourself, and then how you can work on yourself from there. That's what I do with all my clients. I give them the chart, and we figure out where they are on that chart, so we can start working on eliminating the arrogance and the narc traits in that person and bringing back the empathy, figuring out ways that they can bring back the empathy into their lives so that the scales are tipped, so that instead of them having more narcissistic traits, they have more empathy. And that's how you help people cure themselves from their narcissism. You've got to dig back into their childhoods. A lot of it goes back to very bad parenting, abandonment, abuse, all that kind of stuff. But I wasn't going to talk about childhood traumas today. I just wanted to speak to you about the Islamic psychological perspective of it, just in a nutshell, so that people can understand that all of this does exist in Islam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does talk to us about it. And the hypocrites among us, the hypocrites that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about in the Quran, are those who come with a Muslim identity, but in their character, in their beliefs, in their mannerisms, they do not act as Muslims. And they are the Muslim narcissists, because a Muslim narcissist is very good at pretending to be religious, pretending to be pious. They come across as wanting your best interests. They come across as wanting, to give you da'wah and to do all of these things. But when they go home, they're abusive to their families. When they go home, they don't. When they're out in public, they don't care about committing fraud, deceiving people, harassing women, sexually abusing children. All of that, you see it a lot in our Muslim communities. They are the hypocrites that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about. So beware of the hypocrites who come like the shaitan with a deceptive facade, with this religious thing, they want the best for you, but in reality, they're not believers. They're not true believers. So my whole book is about this character, the Muslim narcissist, the person who presents himself or herself as being a narcissist, but they do not act like there's a day of judgment coming. And how can that be a believer? How can he or she be a believer if they do not make account for a day of judgment coming and stop themselves from oppressing others? So I'll stop here because I could go on about this, but I hope that's been interesting for you. Let me know if anyone's got any questions.
That was really great. Alhamdulillah. Okay, so we have Bilal is going to come up. I think he wants to ask something. Okay. Let's see. Yes. Okay, Bilal. Assalamu alaikum, Bilal.
Walaikum salam. Did you have any comments, Ustadh Rakin?
No, I think we're starting with you. Let's start with you, and then afterwards, anyone else who wants to come up, your hand up, we'll bring you up. Or if you, is anyone who's feeling shy, put it in the chat, and we'll let Dr. Mona know, inshallah. So go ahead. Go ahead.
Inshallah. And I'm sorry, I just joined maybe like 15 minutes ago, and I have to go soon, so I just wanted to ask a couple of questions. And
sure.
So I'm sure in your context, you know, when you use the word empath, I get it, like I understand, but it could be also when we talk about narcissism and empaths, not necessarily empathy, but empaths, they're kind of seen from my layman perspective, or from the society's perspective, they're seen as the extremes, right? Where the empath might have some negative connotations in terms of them falling prey over and over again, or them getting too involved in helping others. And so I just wanted to just not necessarily point that out, but is that true, first of all? Like in the society, like the definition like that we have is sort of empath doesn't necessarily mean like, you know, 100% a good thing, right? It could be something that maybe an individual has this thing where they keep on falling prey, or they keep on getting involved in people's lives, you know, and with a good intention, right? But
sure.
But yeah, good.
Okay, so the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he said, a believer is not bitten from the same hole twice, right? So a believer is someone who's meant to learn from their mistakes. Now the empath who doesn't learn from their mistakes, because the empath has this desire to fix broken people. Okay, now empathy is found in both empaths and the codependent. So the codependents who lean more towards empathy, you will find that they tolerate a lot of abuse. They don't have boundaries, but they're very helpful. You know, the codependent will be an absolute martyr for a narcissist because they want to prove themselves. They want to prove that they can change this narcissist's life for the better. They can get rid of the narcissist depression. They can help the narcissist improve their life. And so you'll find that the codependents who have a lot of empathy have no boundaries at all. Now, the higher up you go in empathy, so if you leave the codependency level and you go up to empathy, you will find that because empaths start to establish boundaries, or they already have boundaries, they do not allow people to come into their lives and abuse them. You will find that that's the healthier way to be and to manage your empathy, even Islamically. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not want us to be weak. He wants us to be kind, loving, generous, and everything, but not at the expense of our health, our deen, you know, our physical health, our mental health. Because sometimes when you're overly kind and overly generous to people who do not appreciate, it can really take a toll on your own iman. Like, why is it that Allah sends me bad people in my life? Why is it that no matter what I do, no one appreciates me? And then that empath can fall into depression. They can really fall into depression if they continue to take it personally. Now, the empath who has boundaries from the beginning usually has empath parents who teach them that. So if you have a mother and a father who are both empathic, they will teach you as a child how to set those boundaries with people. Don't be too kind. You know, give people this, you know, when someone gives you something, you don't always have to give them something back. Give them something back when the time is right, and so on. But the codependent has no boundaries, and that's why codependents and narcissists, they stay in very long toxic relationships. So the higher up in empathy you are, the more boundaries you're able to put. And, you know, like a typical empath is someone who, for example, they might marry somebody who's narcissistic. And at the first sign of major disrespect, the empath will say, I'm out of here. I'm not tolerating this. I'm out. This is not what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants me to be in. Especially if that person is not willing to change, not willing to take accountability, not willing to say sorry, the empath will leave. Because the empath has a higher amount of self-esteem and self-confidence than the codependent. Now, what does the codependent do? Because the codependent is reliant on being in this relationship with a narcissist because they care about what people think, they attach their self-esteem to this narcissist. Maybe this narcissist is very good looking. Maybe this narcissist is very rich, and they need to stay in that relationship. They will tolerate the disrespect. They will have no boundaries, and they will allow the narcissist to walk all over them just for the sake of them being in that relationship. That's the difference. Does that make sense, Bilal?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. Okay.
In terms of, I know I may have, this is a part I missed in terms of you mentioned traits, and I think narcissism is made out to be something that's quite rare, and like it might be like even a psychological issue. So like I've never thought about it in terms of like us having, like all of us having certain traits that are can be considered to be narcissistic. So could you talk about those typical traits, not necessarily the traits that are more advanced, but the typical traits that all of us have, that and you may have talked about this, but that we can tame or.
Brother Rakin, is this going to be recorded? Because if it can be saved, then people who missed the first part can listen to it later.
And I can listen.
Yes,
to it
it's
too,
recorded.
so you don't have to repeat yourself.
Yeah, it is recorded. Yes.
Okay.
You can go back and listen to it.
Okay, excellent. So, Bilal, like narcissistic traits can be, just the ability to lie, to steal, to manipulate, to have anger rages, to take revenge, to commit fraud, to abuse, to hit, to beat. All of these things, we all have the ability to do them. Every one of us has the ability to act upon the evil things, like lying, for example, or earning a haram living. But I was saying before that the difference between someone who is empathic and someone who isn't is that the person who has empathy has more control over their nafs, over their ego, whereas the narcissist doesn't have that. So when the narcissist is presented with the opportunity to lie and steal and deceive and abuse, he will take it if it's in his or her benefit to do so. So, for example, I could lie about, it could be anything. My mind's blank right now. But I could lie about how much money I have as a man to deceive someone into thinking that I'm rich. And then that woman marries me and she realizes that I'm broke. So, for example, like that, they don't care how it affects other people. They don't care how their lies, how their deceptions affect other people. So, but the empath, someone who's more empathic, will think twice. So what is empathy? Empathy is the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes and consider their feelings. So if you're presented with the opportunity to lie about something, and it's in your best interest to lie, the empath will say, no, I've got to tell the truth because this could backfire on me later, and I need to be honest. So that is, that's the difference. That the empathic people have more discipline and they have more morals, whereas the narcissist will happily implement all their narc traits to get what they want.
Got it. Thank you. Yeah. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Does anyone else have any questions?
I don't know if Sadiq or Nazra, you have any questions?
So thank you for that introduction, Mona. And also you raised a number of interesting points. And Yeah, like I said, unfortunately for me, I've actually experienced a lot of this in my immediate family, and I guess part of me was kind of thinking maybe they don't fall into this category. But unfortunately, the more I've heard from you, the more it's kind of confirmed my belief. But yeah, going back to my original question, I was planning to kind of give some examples later on as well. But how do you think the best way is to deal with this, where we have these narcissistic personalities within our immediate family?
So it depends. So I've got, by the way, I've got two YouTube podcasts that deal with, how to deal with narcissistic family members. I've got one that deals specifically with how to fulfill your Islamic duties towards narcissistic Muslim parents. And I've got another podcast about how to deal with narcissistic siblings. So, I go into detail in those. If you can check it out later on YouTube. Just type in the Muslim narcissist and my channel will come up. But in general, every case is different. Every case is different, Sadiq, because sometimes, the parents are reliant the parents might be reliant on you to stay in the house to look after them. Sometimes, you do live with the parents, you do live with the siblings. Sometimes you're married and you live with, with your in-laws. So all of that, I've got to take all of that into account before, being able to advise you. But in general, I always say that if you do have narcissistic people that you're living with, try and create some distance. Try and create some distance, because the more you allow them to affect you, the more they're going to drain you. The more they're going to drain you. So you need to distance yourself and you need to start learning how to establish the right boundaries. Learn how to establish the right boundaries in your relationships with your family members, and that will help a lot, inshallah. That's what I do the coaching for. I teach people how, when, and where to place the boundaries so that they can have, they can maintain those ties of kinship, those family ties, but at the same time, you're not allowing them to affect you negatively.
Assalamu alaikum, Chantel. You're on stage now. Alhamdulillah. Please go ahead.
Walaikum salam. I just wanted to ask how you would go about, one, healing from being with such type person, and two, what is I think you answered it before when I asked why empaths and narcissists attract.
Why what? Sorry, the last question.
Like how empaths and narcissists attract. But I think you covered it in what you said earlier, but I just put that in the chat before.
Okay. So the majority of relationships that you will find will be codependent and narcissist. They won't be empath and narcissist. The only times I've actually seen empathic, like men and women, marry narcissistic people is when they've been forced or pressured into that marriage by their families. So, but it's never been out of choice, because like I said, the empath usually has a higher, they've got higher self-esteem, they've got self-value, they know who they are, they've got a strong identity. And so, when they are being disrespected in a marriage, whether they have children or not, they might stay for the protection of the children until they're old enough to leave. But essentially, they will always know that this is not what I deserve. I need to get out of this because this is not healthy. I do not want this for my children. And you get a lot of people who walk out of marriages with children because they don't believe that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala above everyone else does not require us to be in such an abusive, toxic marriage, especially when you do go for mediation and the narcissistic person is just unwilling to change, unwilling to make the necessary changes. But the difference between, again, I did mention this before, that codependents have a higher tolerance for abuse, a higher tolerance for it for many different reasons. And sometimes, for example, a woman who was raised by an abusive father and abusive brothers, abusive uncles, she will learn to normalize that behavior. So when she sees her father rage and get angry and be manipulative and be physically abusive towards her, later on, the man she marries, if he's like that towards her as well, she's going to see that as normal. So they tolerate, a lot of codependent women tolerate a lot of men like this. Why do you think we have such a high number of, women who are in domestic violence, households, like where men are beating up their wives, beating up their daughters and their kids, and it's because they're used to that environment, and they've been in that environment for many, many, many years. So there are a lot of factors involved in this, but it's usually the codependent, narcissist dynamic that causes a lot of people to have children who are narcissistic, because the children born in that household will either become codependent like the mother or father, or they'll become narcissistic like the mother or father, depending on what it is that they appeal to growing up. So, for example, a young boy who sees his narcissistic father have so much power over his mom might grow up to really admire that. Like, wow, I love this power that dad has over everybody. I love that he can control everyone and make everyone scared of him. There are boys who grow up looking at their fathers and wanting to be like that when they're older. So the more narcissistic the children become, the more they become their father's favorites. And that's how they become the golden children. Now, if that same man, that same narcissistic father, has boys who are closer to the mother and they become more codependent, those are the boys that the father will disrespect. He will always say to them, oh, you're just like a little girl. You are worthless, you're useless, you're not like your brother. Look at your brother, he's doing well, he's doing this, and you're just weak, you're pathetic. So that's how boys become so codependent, because they're constantly seeking the approval of their fathers. And so on. It's a huge subject, but that's generally how it starts from childhood, and vice versa as well with women. So does that kind of, does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
There's some questions in the chat. Okay, the first one is from Sister Mario, who says, is it advisable to apologize and seek forgiveness from a narcissistic partner after leaving them for something you did to them, e.g. spoke negatively about them, just to be free from asked about that on the Day of Judgment?
So you're asking if you should ask for forgiveness from the narcissist. I mean, like, at the end of the day, the forgiveness is not for that person. The forgiveness is for you. So that when you free yourself, if you feel like you've wronged somebody and you feel like it's really bugging you that I spoke badly about this person, I need to ask their forgiveness for that, you go ahead and do that. Because if that's going to give you peace, then that's the priority. That gives you the priority. However, just keep it to that. Because you've got to remember, in Islam, like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He already sets the dynamic for forgiveness. He already sets the expectations for forgiveness in Islam. So a lot of people, they say, I want to forgive the narcissist, but I can't because of all the abuse that he or she's put me through. I'm finding it very difficult, to forgive the narcissist, especially when it comes to like times like this of Ramadan. A lot of victims feel really guilty for not being able to find it in their hearts to forgive the narcissist, to forgive the abuser. However, and you get a lot of scholars as well who say if you want Allah to forgive you on the Day of Judgment, then, be willing to forgive the people who hurt you. And that causes a lot of turmoil for people, a lot of turmoil for empathics, because they find it very difficult to do that. Now, if we look at our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what does He say to us when we do wrong? He says, if you want forgiveness, you must come and ask me for it. You must come and ask me for it. And not only do you come and ask me for it, you also have the intention, you need to come with the intention that you will try your best to never do that again, to commit that sin again, and you need to make up for it with good deeds. Okay, so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can see your sincerity in that apology, in that repentance. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He sets that standard for our relationship with Him. Now, if you've committed a sin and you don't repent and you don't make up for it with good deeds, then you need to face that. You will be facing that on the Day of Judgment, because you were too arrogant and too careless to address that and make yourself accountable in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for those mistakes that you made. Now, the same is applied in our relationships with other people. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not expect us to forgive our abusers. If the abuser himself or herself has not come to ask us for that forgiveness, we are under no obligation whatsoever to forgive anybody if we don't want to, especially if that person has not come to ask. Now, when does the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ say to us that we should forgive the abuser? It's when that abuser comes to us and they apologize, and we know that they're sincere because they don't do that again, and they make it up to us. They say, what can I do? What is there that I could possibly do to make up for what I did? This is the type of person the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ says, forgive that person. If you can find that mercy and empathy in your heart to forgive that person, then Allah will give you even more mercy on the Day of Judgment. It's for that person. It's not for the person who abused you and abused you and then, walked away with all that arrogance, not thinking that they have to even say sorry. No. That person Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deals with. And that's why there's no revenge in Islam. The person who did not find enough humility to ask for forgiveness from us, they will find their accounting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because revenge hurts us more. Revenge backfires on us more. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to get on with our lives, forget about this person who did us so much wrong, learn from the mistakes, learn from the lessons that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted us to learn by Him placing that person in our lives, and then we move on. So for example, like narcissistic people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts them in our lives. It's not a life sentence. They're only sent to us temporarily. Some people among us, they hold on to the narcissist. Like, even when the lesson is done, the lesson is learned, the person is still holding on to the narcissist. They don't want them to leave. They're constantly, accepting and tolerating their abuse so that narcissist doesn't leave. And the narcissist will disrespect you for doing that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's looking at everyone who does that and says, I need to make this person up the abuse so that this person understands that this person is not meant to be in that person's life for this, for life. It's just temporary. Because when the narcissist comes into your life, I'll tell you what they do. They will show you all the cracks in your character. That's the good that they bring. They will look at you and deal with you as someone flawed. So when they disrespect you and you accept it, that's a crack in your character. When they abuse you and you tolerate it, that's a crack in your character. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to see those cracks. And He sent the narcissist to show you where they are. He sent the narcissist to show you you've got low self-esteem. You don't love yourself. He wants you to ask yourself, why do you tolerate abuse? Why do you tolerate disrespect? Why do you allow this person to affect your iman? All of these things, the narcissist comes into our life to teach us about them. And so the believer, the smart person who is able to heal and move out, come out of this situation, doesn't care. Doesn't care whether this narcissist comes to ask them for forgiveness or not. Their ajr, their reward is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because what they came out with is greater. What they came out with is, okay, now I know what I need to fix so that I will never meet someone like that again. I will never let someone come into my life and treat me like that again. So essentially it's training, it's character training from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He doesn't want you to be weak. He wants you to be empathic with boundaries. He wants you to be empathic with dignity, with self-respect. So sometimes a narcissist is sent into your life to teach you how to be stronger. Not so that people can get depressed. Not so that people can be abused. Not so that people dwell on the forgiveness of the narcissist. If you want to forgive a narcissist for something that you did to them, by all means go ahead. But you don't have to forgive your abuser if they haven't asked for it. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Okay, there's another question here. There's a few questions are coming in now.
Okay.
So here's one by Maze. Oh no, before Maze there was Spitfire said, could we bring this awareness to the local masjids and Muslim communities to help identify narcissistic behavior, and perhaps offer resources to help sisters and brothers to free from this abuse, gaslighting?
Sure. Well, I've set up the podcast, my YouTube podcast. I do highlight a lot of issues there. I have written my book about this, so I am trying to create some sort of awareness, about all of these issues. I have found, like, from speaking to scholars before, they do shy away from this issue. They find that combining the Muslim identity with a narcissistic identity is very problematic, and it's something that they prefer to avoid. So that's why I wrote the book, and that's why I did my YouTube channel, because I'm trying to create an awareness of how much this information is needed out there.
Okay. And another question by Maze Mahmood. It says, how to stop yourself getting hoovered back in by the narcissist husband? Try to see the best in him and pray that he's changed, but then the signs of disrespect, abuse start to reappear.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so when you're hoovered by a narcissist, when someone comes back, when an abuser comes back into your life, they will do so for two reasons. Number one, they'll heat check. So they will heat check to see where you are in life. Are you still depressed over them? Have you moved on? Are you stronger? Are you better? Are you worse off? They need to know exactly where you are so that they know at what point to come back. So they might just say, hey, how are you? Just checking in on you. And you might say something like, a victim often says, oh, I'm not doing very well. Ever since we broke up, I've been depressed. I can't move on with my life. He's thinking, yes, that's what I wanted to hear. You've given him the ego stroke he needs now, or she needs. This applies to men and women. You've given him the ego stroke. So now it's like, okay, I'm not going to come back into your life because you're still depressed. That's exactly where I want you. Now, if they come back and to heat check and they realize that you're actually okay, you've moved on, you've got over it, you're dealing with your life, that's when they hoover you. Now, they will only hoover you to test you if you're still stupid, basically, if you're still naive, if you still have low self-esteem. Because the only people who allow themselves to be hoovered back into the narcissist's life are those people who have very low self-esteem. Why do I say that? It's because you already know who this person is. You already know, you've already experienced the abuse of this person. So even the narcissist is thinking, why on earth would they want me back? Why would this person let me back into their life? Unless they are really naive, unless they haven't changed, unless they are easily manipulated. So they'll come back in to your life, and they will treat you worse than they did before, because now they disrespect you even more. Now the disrespect is even worse because they can't believe that you've taken them back. They cannot believe you've fallen for it again. These people do not change. It takes a long time for people to change, and if they want to change. Usually it's a very humbling experience that happens to them that causes them to change. Because the only thing that can knock your arrogance out of you is a very humbling experience set by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the Hoover, again, there's a podcast on my channel about the Hoover. It's about, the people who get hoovered and the people who don't. What does it mean? So please do check that out on my YouTube channel. I do go into it in detail there. But that's all it is. They just want, and that's why it always gets worse. You think that the narcissist has changed, but the more you let them in, the worse they get, because they just have no respect for you. They have no respect. They want you to actually say, sorry, you're not coming back in again. They want you to say that, because you're not helping them by enabling them to constantly abuse you. And we go back to that hadith of, if you want to help your brother, your narcissist brother, stop him or her from abusing. Don't enable it. Hope that answers it.
Yes, it does. Alhamdulillah. Okay, we have Zainab. Assalamu alaikum, Zainab. Yes, the stage is yours.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you very much. I just had a question for Dr. Mona, please, which is in relation to narcissism. So people who would fall under, let's say, kin. mother, father, siblings, husband or wife. So people who are held very highly in Islam.
Mm-hmm.
And we hear countless of lectures about, the parents and paradise lies under your mother's feet, all these type of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people, the reason why they are not able to stand up for themselves is because they fear that by standing up for themselves or for other people against people who fall in these categories, especially parents, they are somehow going against God.
Right.
Like I've met people who it's that kind of religious manipulation and abuse, i.e. them taking advantage of their status, that causes a lot of people to not be able to know how to stand up for themselves or to put boundaries with parents or siblings, everything like that. What would you advise in that case that an individual can do to help themselves, to validate themselves, as opposed to looking for the next sheikh or whoever to validate them?
It all starts with education. If you are not sufficiently educated in Islam, you will not know the difference between spiritual religious abuse and what Islam actually is about. Like, what are the rights of parents, and when do you owe them compliance, and when do you not owe them obedience? You need to educate yourself as to what is considered to be acceptable. So, for example, you have a narcissistic mother, who will ask her son or daughter to go and spy on the neighbors, for example. Go and spy on the neighbors, tell me what they're doing. And then you'll find the son is not comfortable doing that. Like, Mom, I don't want to do that. And she says, if you do not do that, I will be displeased with you. If I'm displeased with you, I'll be displeased with you. And so you find that a lot of children of narcissistic parents will end up doing things that they're not comfortable with, because the narcissistic parent will use Islam to manipulate their children. And what will happen is that with time, in their teenage, in young adult years, they will start to rebel against Islam because they hate everything that their parents taught them about it. They will hate everything to do with, obedience to the parents, and because they always felt like they were abused and they were manipulated, but they attach it to Islam because they don't know any different. So when you're a child, unfortunately, it's very difficult for you to understand the difference between, religious manipulation and what's right, because children, subhanAllah, they're born with a moral compass. When you ask them to do something wrong, they don't feel comfortable. They will question what you tell them. And then when you get to teenage age, which is when, it's an age where people need to start independently researching Islam, because they're not encouraged to do that, because they've got bad friends, because, their local mosque isn't providing enough, they're not providing enough classes, enough education about all of this, about spiritual abuse, religious abuse. This has only come now recently. The subject of religious and spiritual abuse is only coming out recently because more and more people are leaving Islam because of being, spiritually and religiously abused. And it started with the parents. So I would say that if someone is in their teenage age, in their 20s, 30s, then in order for them to kind of independently understand and create the right boundaries with their parents, to stop the parents using, spiritual abuse against them, they need to start learning about Islam properly, instead of going to sheikhs. Because if you go to a sheikh, the sheikh will say, no matter what your mum does, generalize it at her feet. Just listen and just be obedient. Pray for her hidayah. She's your mother at the end of the day. She's old. Don't have a bad relationship with her. That's what a lot of sheikhs and imams will tell you. And it's wrong, because you're still enabling the behavior of that toxic mother. Because if she's not going to do it to you anymore, she's going to do it to your own children. She's going to do it to her grandkids. And so on. And the cycle will repeat. And that is why a lot of children who are religiously abused as children, when they grow up, they become men and women who use Islam to justify abuse in their marriages. So, for example, again, I take it back to, let's say a narcissistic father who uses Islam to manipulate his sons into doing what he wants them to do. If they admire the power that this kind of abuse has on everyone in the family, they will grow up being husbands like that. And that's why you get a lot of narcissistic husbands now who use the deen, who use misinterpreted Quran verses and ahadith to manipulate and abuse women. And then those women start to hate Islam. They start to resent the Prophet, astaghfirullah, and they start to resent Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they start to ask, why did Allah give them so many, why did Allah give men this authority over us? Why did he do this? Why did he do that? And that's how people lose their iman. And it's, again, satanic energy. It's a satanic mission of the narcissist to deplete people of their iman. And, if this isn't something, this can only be battled with education, with the right education. Because once you start to learn that this has nothing to do with obedience to the parents, that, manipulation, religious manipulation is actually forbidden in Islam because of the fact it can drive people away from the deen. Like if the result is driving people away from the deen, those people resenting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, those people finding it so difficult to love their parents because they're so abusive and manipulative, then where is it taking them? Where is this religious obedience to their parents taking them? It's driving them further away from the deen. So we do need more education about this. We do need people to understand that this is not a part of the deen and that you need to start establishing the correct boundaries. Again, I've got a podcast about this on my YouTube channel. It's called How to Fulfill Your Islamic Duties towards your narcissistic Muslim parents. It's all in detail in there, and it deals with this specific problem.
MashaAllah, Jazakallah khair, Dr. Mola. I mean, people are really enjoying, alhamdulillah, and you're getting a lot of, really valuable information, alhamdulillah. Okay, we have Sister Layla here. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Layla.
Alaikum salam. I thought that was lovely, Dr. Zainab, and gained a lot from listening to that. Can you hear me? Yeah. So I wanted to seek some advice. So it's a family member that, they do have a diagnosed personality disorder, and obviously very up and down, fiery personality. But so what they tend to do is kind of control people through silent treatments. Mm-hmm. And so she knows that it works on people and it is a way to control people. But so she'll have times where she'll cut me out of her and her kids' lives. But I was concerned because obviously Ramadan is coming up, and as a Muslim, if you don't speak to someone for more than 3 days, you're out of the fold of Islam. And so I have made an effort with her, but there is no it's like when you just can't, some people you can't make up with some people.
No,
because they don't, they just they're not interested, or they want you to beg, or I don't know what.
Sure.
Just not interested. So I'm just feeling a bit conscious, because even though I know in my mind that it's better that this person, just kind of takes time out, but I'm just concerned that I'm not doing everything that I can, even though I don't want them really to be. They're just very angry. It's a very angry person to have around, very exhausting. Mm-hmm. And it's just difficult because with the silent treatment,
yeah,
it's like it controls, your life. So I want to kind of just not have to deal with it anymore. But I don't know if Islamically I'm supposed to read a lot more.
And sorry, you mentioned that this person's related to you. How?
Well, she's my sister.
Oh, she's your sister.
Yeah,
okay, I understand.
So because she's cross with me, I live with my parents still, and she lives away. And so she actually completely avoid coming to the house at all. Mm-hmm. So it appears that, she's not coming because of me. But I have no issue with her here. I would never confront her with anything.
Right.
So it's like, it makes me appear like I'm kind of cutting her off, even though she's free. She'll still send her child around to be babysat, but she'll just park up the street. And is very manipulative, because the home is hers just as much as it's mine.
Sure.
So I don't know. It's just very difficult to explain.
Okay, the best thing that you can do in this situation is to try and communicate with her effectively and just say, look, narcissistic people, they have the minds of children. It's very difficult for them to communicate as adults, as mature adults. So they will always prefer to just go into a tantrum. They'll go disappear somewhere. They'll give you the silent treatment. They'll ghost you. They will blame everything on you because if you just take a step back and look at how they all behave like children. They're emotionally stunted from childhood. So sometimes when communication is not effective, with them, like mature, sitting down maturely and actually having a conversation with her saying, look, you're my sister and, we need to sort this out for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because, this is we're a family and, I can't keep dealing with this coming and going. If she's not willing to have that conversation, then if she decides to ignore you, she's not giving you clear answers as to what you're doing wrong, she doesn't give you clear answers as to what the problem is, then if she decides to ignore you for a week, 2 weeks, a month, that is now her problem. It is no longer your problem to carry. She has been used to, for a very long time, for you chasing her to maintain the ties of the family. So the more you do that, the more she becomes used to you chasing her because she knows that she can get away with that treatment. She can get away with treating you like that. And you're not helping her to, again, take accountability for herself. So you have no reason to ignore her. You have no reason to, stop talking to her. You carry on as normal. But if she does not want to talk to you, then it's a sin upon herself if she decides to not speak to you for more than 3 days. Now, she's accountable for Allah for that. Because not only is she not trying to fix the problem and find a solution, she is being manipulative in this way, causing distress to other people. So a lot of empaths, they take on the problems of other people and they make them their own. This is not your problem to take. You've done what you need to do as a Muslim and as a human being and as a sister. Now, the way she chooses to react is her problem. Let her deal with the consequences of how she wants to deal with that problem. She might get angry. She might get more bitter. She might become more arrogant. She might even blame you more, saying, oh, you really don't care about me, do you? Because she's used to you chasing her. Stop chasing her, because the more you chase her, the more she will not hold herself accountable for the wrong that she's doing. So let that be her problem now to deal with. And always let her know, because you're my sister, the door is always open for you to come back whenever you want to come back. You're my sister. But don't chase her. Don't chase her. Give her the space and time to reflect and face the consequences of her being isolated from the family because of her own actions. I hope that helps. Makes sense?
It does, yeah. And especially because she's a single mom as well. So there was that guilt complex. And with her, when she's kind of she's all or nothing. So she'll completely, when she is in my life, it's like I have to do so much for her. And of course she's my sister, and there's that thing of, okay, well, she's a single mom, I have to help her here. But it gets very exhausting. So almost when she cuts me off, it's almost like a break.
That's her problem, though. She has to take responsibility for that child. The child is her responsibility and not yours. You're taking on all her problems. You're taking on the idea and the reality of her being a single mother when she's not even thinking of that herself. As a single mother, she should be prioritizing a good relationship with her family because she needs that support. She needs that support with her child. Do you see how you're taking on all her problems?
No, definitely. And now, because I'm not there, so it's my other sister who's heavily pregnant and has a young kid who can't, she's now in that problem. So she was calling me this morning to have a rant, and she said, and she's very voiceless, she can't express herself, and she just feels completely so overwhelmed and drained because she needs money, and then she needs a babysitter, and then she needs money, and she was breaking down. And I said, you need to just voice how you feel in the nicest way you can. But we know that if she does that, she's going to blow up on her and cut her off. So that's really tricky.
Right, yeah. people just take on other people's problems far too much. Far too much. You have to let that person take accountability and take responsibility for their own problems. Let them face the consequence of what they do to other people. It's really important that people do that.
No, Jazakallah, thank you. It explains a lot.
You're welcome. No problem.
MashaAllah. Dr. Mona, I just want to just double check if you said, if you're okay, you still got some energy left, or because you've been going, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give it about another 10 minutes. I'll give it another
Okay.
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah, mashallah. Okay, alhamdulillah. Right, there was one question that I did see in the chat as well. Okay, by Kofa, do genetics play a role in the development of a narcissistic personality disorder?
No, it's not a genetic thing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us in the Quran that, you know, that like we're born pure. The Prophet Muhammad said that there is no newborn baby who is not born upon the fitrah. Every baby is born upon the fitrah with a very strong connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So mental health problems, I mean, this is widely debated. Are mental health problems genetic or not? Now, if your brain is wired differently, so for example, if you have ADHD, if you're autistic, if you've got like Asperger's syndrome, then your brain will just be wired differently. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. You don't have a disease. It's just that your ability to communicate with other people is different from, you know, neurotypical people who, you know, don't struggle with, you know, with learning and communicating and expressing emotions. So it's not considered to be a disease. So you get people who are, again, you know, they're born with, you know, bipolar disorder. Some people, there are a lot of psychologists who say that bipolar disorder is genetic, schizophrenia is genetic, but none of them are considered to be diseases. It's just a rewiring of the brain and how those people communicate, and it just needs more work. However, to be born a narcissist, no way. No child is ever born narcissistic. No child is ever born as a psychopathic tendencies. Children can actually be born with behavior problems because of a traumatic pregnancy. So if a mother, and this is why it's so important, guys, it's so important to marry the right person, because if a woman, an empathic woman or codependent woman, is married to a narcissist and he gives her a traumatic pregnancy, you know, she's depressed, she's crying, she hates her life, she hates herself, all of that energy gets passed to her baby. So you will actually find that sometimes from the sheer amount of stress that a woman goes through in her pregnancy, a baby might actually be born with loads of physical deformities. He might be born with, you know, just like loads of health problems and behavior problems as well. That energy, that negative energy gets passed down into a baby. Sometimes a woman will have a baby who just doesn't stop crying. And no one knows why. This baby just does not stop crying. Absolute nightmare. The baby doesn't sleep. It's from all that negative energy that's come from the pregnancy. Because this, especially when that woman doesn't want that baby, she feels stuck now in a marriage with a narcissistic husband, and she doesn't even want this baby, but she feels like she's got to have this baby now. And it just causes so much trauma for her, so much trauma for the baby. If you look at, and I've seen this in many examples of like people I've come across in my life, whenever a woman has given birth to a baby that she really didn't want, growing up, when that child grew up to be an adult, they had serious issues with the mother and they never knew why. They don't know why. That particular child that she was pregnant with at a time when she was so stressed and so upset and so depressed, you will find that that particular child has issues with the mother. They don't have a good relationship. And when you ask them why, they don't really know. They just don't like their mums. They've just got this thing with their mums. They can't put their finger on it. It does get passed down. But narcissism is a learned behavior. So if someone is going to become narcissistic, it's because they have copied narcissistic behavior from a parent, or if that child didn't have parents, then it will be from nannies, babysitters, whoever they're closest to. growing up. It could be an uncle, their favorite uncle. The parents might be both codependent, for example, and they have, the child has a narcissistic uncle that they absolutely love to spend so much time with. He or she will learn the narc traits growing up. So narcissism is learned behavior and physical deformities and other disorders like ADHD and autism. They're not considered to be diseases. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's fair when He gives, when babies are born, they're born sin-free. They're all sin-free. Narcissistic traits come with us as we grow older. Does that make sense, guys? Does that answer it?
100%, yeah.
Okay.
Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair, Dr. Mon. I think that work was really very informative.
Mm-hmm.
And alhamdulillah, yes, this is recorded as well, so people will be able to go back and listen to it. But I think, so what would be good now is just for you to just let people know how can they get in contact with you. So yeah, they want to even be one of your clients. How do they get in contact with you, inshallah?
Sure. So I've got loads of information on my website. It's called themuslimnarcissist.com. It's all about the book. If anyone wants to contact me via email, it's author@themuslimnarcissist.com. I deal with both men and women. So, a lot of people, they say, oh, narcissists, they're, the majority of them are men. Actually, there's a growing number now of narcissists who are women. And again, I've got another podcast on my channel about how narcissistic women ruin the lives of their good Muslim husbands. All of that's on there. So, if anyone does want to, reach out, you can also follow my Instagram page. I always do, every week I do live Q&As for people who have burning questions. I come on live and I will answer everyone's questions, but I'm always posting about things. So you've got the YouTube channel. There's a lot of information on the YouTube channel. I have posted it in the chat, the link to the YouTube channel. And I constantly post new content every week, every Friday. Tomorrow's podcast, inshallah, will be about the red pill Muslims out there and how they're really affecting the youth in a bad way and how narcissism plays a lot into that. So, inshallah, that will be beneficial. But yeah, you could just email me, author@themuslimnarcissist.com. Do grab a copy of the book if you haven't already. The book really breaks down codependency, empathy, and narcissism, and psychopathy as well. You will be able to know from the book where you're placed and how you can, help yourself, moving forward. If you're dealing with a narcissist, if you are finding yourselves, always marrying them or attracted to them, how can you, break free and understand all that trauma and abuse that you're going through, whether that's within yourselves, whether that's because of the narcissism and codependency in yourselves or because of the narcissism and codependency in other people. So yeah, I hope that's all of that's helpful information for you, inshallah.
Alhamdulillah, I think that was very good, mashallah. They definitely know how to get in contact with you. Okay, we just had one more. I don't know if Sarah, I'm not sure. Okay, she's come on stage. Maybe it's the last question.
Thank you. Jazakallah for this wonderful, wonderful room. I feel like for young women, I guess young men now too, if you're saying there is a rise of women, there's not enough literacy to tell them these are qualities in men you should completely avoid when courting because they are toxic traits that will repeat in a marriage. And whether or not you get a narcissist diagnosis, this is very much DSM behavior of a narcissist. What can you tell women about behaviors of men and the patterns of behavior when courting before it gets serious for you to say, no, I don't want to proceed further. This is not going to go down well. Because I think we're very much in that everything's got to be halal. Women don't understand what love bombing is because I guess we come from cultures where we're not showered with that much affection. Men know how to play the I'm your knight in shining armor game and then get you and then change later on, which really does happen. It's literally a narcissistic trait, right? Yeah. How do we employ this language for women for them to be a lot harsher with their lens of discerning potential men in their lives?
So the issue with love bombing is that if a narcissistic man is going to target a codependent woman, and he already knows, so a narcissist will tailor his or her love bombing according to what he or she feels is missing in that codependent person's life. Okay, so for example, if a man feels that a woman is very lonely in her life, she doesn't have anyone, she's got no family, she's vulnerable, she might be a single mother, then he will tailor make his love bombing strategy to fulfill the needs of that codependent. So he will come across as being someone who will take care of her. I will be your family. I will do this for you. I will do that for you. And he will start to show her ways in which that, he cares about her. Now, this could be genuine. There could be good men out there who genuinely want to, take care of a single mother and fulfill all those needs that she has. However, the difference between someone genuine and someone who is love bombing you, there's three main things. The first one is, does your gut tell you that something's just off? Like, does it make you feel comfortable with this person doing all of these things for you so soon? Because a narcissist will always do it very soon. They will just jump straight into it. There is no period of getting to know you slowly. No, if the narcissist sees that you're a prime target, he or she will jump straight into it. You'll get compliments from day one. You'll get the I love you 3 days later. That's what they do. They just jump straight in because they've got no time to waste. They need that supply and they need it quick. Whereas someone who is genuine, they'll take their time to actually get to know you, to see if you're a good fit for them, to see if you're compatible, to see if he's a good fit for you, she's a good fit for you. But a narcissist will dive straight in. So the first thing is, does your gut tell you that something's off? Because that will be your main soldier that will help you fight that narcissist. Your gut instinct. It's given to you by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as one of your superpowers. If you do not trust your gut instinct, you are setting yourself up for doom. The second thing is, does this person's portrayal of himself or herself match their character, match their actions? So someone might come across online as being very pious, very religious. They want to do things the halal way and this and that. But in their actions, when you're talking to them over the phone, they might talk about inappropriate things. They might make inappropriate jokes. They might say things that trigger your alarm. It's like, oh, well, that just sounds a bit weird. So if you find contradictions between how they present themselves and who they actually are when they start to get comfortable with you, that's the second sign that someone is presenting just his false self, the self that they want you to see. Now, the third sign is that the narcissist will often study you first. So all the questions that they want to know about you will get asked first. They will pretend to care. Well, actually, they do care, because this will assess if you're a good victim or not. They will ask you questions about your situation. Do you live alone? Do you have brothers? Do you have a wali? What's your history? Were you abused by an ex-husband? All of these things they want to know to assess your vulnerability. Always be aware of the types of questions someone asks you, because sometimes, and I always get my clients to write down the questions that often come up, in the early talking stages, because narcissists will ask you questions that assess your level of vulnerability. So if he sees that you're isolated, you have brothers who don't care about you, you've got an absent father, you're struggling as a single mother, you're struggling financially, these are all perfect gateways for him to get in. And he will start to mirror you, he or she. It's not just for men, sorry, this is for women too. A woman can mirror you as well. They start to paint a picture in your eyes that they are the perfect person for you, soulmate. And you will see that very quickly. They will start to, like, for example, you might say, I really enjoy doing these activities. He'll be like, oh, me too. oh, I love that. I love doing this and I love doing that. They will always do it. They will always say it after you've said it. It's always after you've said, oh, what kind of movies do you like? Oh, me too. What kind of this do you like? Oh, me too. Oh, I've got a bad relationship with my family. Oh, me too. Because he wants you to trauma bond yourself to him. So if he's asking you questions about your previous marriage and you tell him, you make the big mistake of telling him that you were seriously abused in that marriage, he's thinking, brilliant. That means she's codependent. That means I can abuse her as well. And then he'll pretend to tell you about his ex-wife. Oh, the same thing happened to me. You know, I was abused by my ex-wife. She did this to me and that to me. And then when he starts to open up with you, most of it's lies, by the way, because he would be the abuser. He's the one who caused his last marriage to end. The more he's open with you from a very early age, from a very early stage, the more you're going to feel vulnerable. You're going to fall into that trap of oversharing. And when you start to overshare your vulnerabilities and you start to tell him, my brothers don't care about me. I haven't seen my brothers. You know, I don't have a good relationship with my mother. You know, my dad doesn't care about us. That is when you kind of set yourself up for a horrible narcissistic marriage, because he will come in and pretend to be that hero who will save you from all of that. He'll pretend to be your protector, your provider, your everything. And you fall in love. That's the love bombing. You fall in love with that person, and now you think there's hope. Alhamdulillah, there's good men out there. I need to hold on to this. You know, I need to make sure that, you know, there are no men like this anymore out there. No matter who I meet, they're not like this. Because empathic men stay away from codependent women. As soon as an empathic man picks up that you're codependent, you're not healed from your traumas, you're not healed from your, you know, past baggage, he'll move on. If he senses that you're narcissistic, he'll move on. But a narcissist will prey on you because he can see that you're vulnerable and you have insecurities. So those are the three main things that, you know, men and women should both look out for in the early stages, because if all of this happens in the first 2 weeks of getting to know somebody, you're being love bombed. You're being love bombed, and badly. So there are lots of signs, telltale signs online that someone's narcissistic, men and women. I've got a whole list of them actually on my website. If you go to the website, themuslimnarcissist.com, go to articles, and I actually did an article for Muzmatch. I wrote it for Muzmatch, and they shared it with their members, because so many people who are on Muzmatch are getting scammed by narcissists. It is a narcissistic playground on there. So you can have a look at all the points. There's 21 points of how to identify a narcissist on our marriage app. But I hope that helps, inshallah. Those are the three main giveaways for love bombing.
Alhamdulillah, mashallah, Dr. Mona, Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much. That was really good and really, really helpful. And as I said before, anyway, the brothers and sisters, they can actually come back and listen to it again.
Right, yeah.
And I would say to everyone, definitely, you know, get the book. I've actually got the book myself. It's really good, very informative. So, you know, make sure you can get the book. It is on Amazon, and you can probably get it from the web. Can you get it from your website as well?
No, it's just on Amazon. It's on the book depository as well. So anyone who's out of the UK,
yes, alhamdulillah. So make sure you get the book. And a different topic inside narcissism. It is so wide. It is so vast. And
it is, yeah. I'm trying to cram in as much detail as possible. I could talk about this for ages, but I'm just trying to, you know, cram it all in a nutshell.
Yes. Alhamdulillah, we definitely will, because it's been really, really great just listening to you. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah, good. I'm glad you've, inshallah, all benefited from it and you've enjoyed it. There's so much more to it. You know, it's just, I just want people to know that, you know, there is something in Islam. There's a lot of information in Islam about, you know, dealing with narcissistic people. We have so many examples, and, you know, we have so many examples in prophetic stories. I mean, even the brothers of Yusuf alayhi salam, they were all narcissistic, and all the people of Quraysh that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam he dealt with, they were all narcissistic. So we have prime examples that are being seen today, because people are not you know, they're not holding on to the deen. And when you let go of the deen, you let the satanic arrogance get the better of you, and we go back to pagan Arabia, you know. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said that. He said towards the end of time, the Muslim Ummah will go back to pagan Arabia. And now it's clear why. It's clear why. It's because of the narcissism that's growing amongst us.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Okay, Jazakallah khair, everyone who came today. So if you haven't joined already, you can go to the top and you can join the Rumi's Cave group, and then you'll be informed of all of the lectures that we have, all the talks that we have, all the discussions that we have. Right, so this is going to be our last one until after Ramadan, inshallah, because next Thursday, inshallah, we should be in Ramadan. And so we're going to have a break, inshallah, for Ramadan, and then we'll be back again after Ramadan, and definitely you'll definitely be, you know, hearing from Dr. Muna again. And make sure you all go and get the book, and please make dua for all of us. May Allah bless us all and give us a beautiful Ramadan, inshallah, and increase all of our iman, inshallah, and help us to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And we end, as we always do, with Surah A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem, bismillahir rahmanir rahim, wa ala as inna insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihat wa tawassaw bil haqq wa tawasaw bis sabr. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuhu.
Wa alaikum assalam. It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.